I just saw another person talking about Intermezzo on BookTube. Didn't that book come out like months ago?
Oh, yeah, but the chokehold that Sally Rooney has over the book community is unmatched. It's like nothing you've ever seen.
It's not even just the book community. Lucy Dacus put it on her best of 2024 list on TikTok.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Oh my god, wait, did you hear about her and Julian?
Yeah. Yeah, obviously. But I mean, like, we've been new.
That's true.
Yeah.
So wait, you've like never read any Sally Rooney anything?
Nope.
But you watch Normal People though, right?
No. Conversations with Friends. Oh, that was good. You believed me for a second.
I did.
You believed me for a second.
I really did.
Yeah, no. No hate to the Saltburn girl, though. She's a great actor.
No, the cast was stacked.
For real. I wanted to watch Normal People. I just never got around to it.
You should. It's worth it.
I guess I just never really got the hype around Sally Rooney. I mean, she's a good lit fic writer. So are so many other people. Like, why is everybody so obsessed with her?
Well,
I don't mean it in a bad way. I just don't know. You know about all this stuff, right? Like, what's all the fuss about?
I'm glad you asked.
She's on millions of readers' bookshelves worldwide. She's received innumerable accolades. She's gotten praise from the likes of Taylor Swift to President Barack Obama. She was named Time's 100 Most Influential People in 2022 with a write-up by Lena Dunham that says this: "Several times in a generation, there is a writer who speaks such basic truths in such skillful prose that they become a signpost for all our needs and concerns, all our unanswered questions and anxious dreams." I'm, of course, talking about Sally Rooney. Whether you missed the boat on Sally Rooney, you've only read one or two of her books, probably Normal People, or you've been a fan this whole time, this video is for you to learn more, or even more, about the author who is often heralded as the voice of a generation. We'll be going over Sally Rooney's background, themes that show up in her books, a snapshot of all of her novels and short stories along the way, and the limited series that have been made about some of her work. So you finally know what all the fuss is about. I'm Christina Sophia, and welcome to A Beginner's Guide to Sally Rooney. Sally Rooney is an Irish 33-year-old novelist, screenwriter, essayist, and editor. She got her degree in English from Trinity College Dublin and stayed for a master's degree in American literature, where she started working on the first book that she ever got published, Conversations with Friends. She's known for writing intense relationships between characters and not using quotation marks for dialogue.
Well, sorry, there's no quotation marks?
No, but her characters' voices are so distinct, you get used to it really quickly. Plus, the audiobooks have really good narrators.
Word.
She has a deep respect for the novel as an artistic form. In an interview for her latest book with The New Statement, she says this: "The novel emerged to accommodate subjectivity under the extreme changes brought about by the capitalist system, and perhaps it could still do that for us today." Although there are certainly painful depictions of what it means to be alive in Sally Rooney's novels, the optimism that you heard in that statement also exists in her work. When confronted with the phrase sad girl lit that her books often were associated with, she stopped and said, "My books aren't really all that sad, are they?" Rooney describes writing as making sense of the world around her and the people around her. Her books definitely fall under the category of literary fiction. They're incredibly character-driven, and she's a character writer first. She often talks about how when she first gets an idea for a book, she's usually getting an idea of a character. Or a character and a dynamic, I should say. She says that those two things can't be divorced from each other. Characters are always influenced by other characters in her brain. There's no Connell without Marianne. And that makes sense, because she's also staunchly against individualism.
And I also don't believe this sort of like, everyone should be very self-sufficient and you don't need anyone else to love you. You just need yourself to love you. I think that's nonsense. I mean, of course, we're all connected in a network of human relationships all the time, which sustain us. So the idea that you can move through the world as a self-sustaining individual is it's a fiction. It's a delusion, really. Human relationships are very important. They're very sustaining, whatever form they take. They don't need to be conventional. They can be very unconventional, but they're not just optional. You can't just opt out of the rest of humankind.
Rooney discusses these topics in her work. Many characters are experiencing the dissonance between what they're feeling in their internal lives and how they're expected to engage in the societal structure that they live in, which is usually a capitalist one.
I feel like we're bringing up capitalism a lot, and I don't understand why it's relevant.
Well, Rooney is also a staunch Marxist.
Everyone's favorite Marxist, right?
Usually one of the first things that people say when you ask them what a Sally Rooney book is about is class.
Wait, I feel like I saw a lot of stuff about publishers giving out merch with her books.
The Sally Rooney bucket hat.
The Sally Rooney bucket hat.
Well, yes, and it's something that her critics bring up. I will say she's not naive to it. In an interview for Normal People with the London Book Review, Rooney talks openly about how she doesn't feel that the profit-making model for publishing challenging works of art is good. It's unhealthy for the artist, and it's unhealthy for society. She also said that she's conflicted about her participation in this particular system. She knows that she can say all of these things, but it's not actually changing anything. And she knows it's not actually changing anything because she has the ability to say them. And her saying them is ultimately trying to get people to buy the product, which is the book. It brings up an interesting question. How do we exist outside of a capitalist system when everything is a capitalist system? I'm not trying to absolve any accountability. I'm just saying it's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It's got to be really fascinating for somebody who considers themselves a Marxist.
Yes, and I completely remember what Marxism is.
Don't worry, I got you. Honestly, when I started thinking about what Marxism was, I can only recall fragmented knowledge from my years in education, so I decided to consult one of my favorite internet resources, Crash Course, in this case, Crash Course Political Theory. They have this to say. In a Marxist point of view, want to understand why a society has the moral values it does? You need to look at the market. Economic systems are the root of everything. In Marx's own words, every class struggle is a political struggle. They also bring up the essential idea of dialectical materialism. Don't worry, it's just a kind of scary way of saying, once we understand the world in terms of its material economic realities, we can better understand how history works, how things change over time. So essentially, Marxism is saying we need to put the market, or the material goods that we create and produce, at the center of how we think about a whole society. It believes that capitalism is predicated on a system of exploitation, where the proletariats, the underpaid, overworked middle or working class, are in conflict with the bourgeoisie, the owners of the companies, the CEOs, the upper class elite. And when the conflict occurs and they clash, it can cause a sense of estrangement in the worker. Karl Marx believed that human beings were productive by nature. We like to make things, and we get our sense of self partly by seeing our impact on the world around us. But when we're engaging in capitalism, the workers just get money. And that's it. They don't see the effect that their work has on the world around them. So it can make them feel estranged from the work, from what they're actually making, then from other people, then from themselves, which is a phenomenon known as alienation, which is another huge buzzword when it comes to Sally Rooney characters and narratives.
Okay, so you're telling me this comes up in her work.
Yes.
But how do you write a Marxist novel?
Rooney's been open that she doesn't actually know the answer to that question, but it's something that she's curious about in her work. I can give you some examples of how Marxism shows up in her novels, though. There's an amazing video about Marxism and how it's in conversation with all of Sally Rooney's work by a YouTuber called Roshin's Reading. I really recommend that you watch the whole thing if you're interested in what I'm going to say and want to do a real deep dive. Roshin also just posted more videos about Irish authors, why they're so good, why they're kind of taking over the literary space, so you should check them out. I don't know Roshin. She seems great, and if you're watching this, hi, you're awesome. Let's be friends. Also, I hope that you don't mind that I'm going to be referencing your video in this next bit. So in Roshin's video, Marxism and Millennial Romance, the Sally Rooney Phenomenon, what a great title, she brings up a really good example of Marxism in Normal People. While being completely vague because we are not doing spoilers in this video, there's a moment in Normal People where Connell needs a place to stay in Dublin, and Marianne can give him a place to stay. She has the resources, but he doesn't ask and she doesn't offer. Why is that important? Well, Connell and Marianne have completely different socioeconomic backgrounds. Connell's mother was actually the housekeeper for Marianne's family, so there's tension there. Connell is feeling class conscious and maybe a little bit of shame, and he doesn't know how to ask her, and Marianne has never been in that situation, so she doesn't really understand what he's asking by not asking. Roshin puts it like this: Rooney explores how capitalism interacts with human relationships. prejudice. So it's an effective depiction of that, and also one of the other things that's hugely important to understanding Sally Rooney's novels, which is one of the first things that I said about her, if not the first thing that I said about her when I started this section of the video. She is Irish, and so are her characters. Take a look at this comment under Roisin's video. Ireland is a very indirect culture. You can't accept a slice of cake or a cup of tea without declining at least twice first. So hosts will almost always ask 3 times in case the guest feels obligated to say no the first 2 times. The colonized mindset seeps into every interaction. You can be seen to have aspirations above your station or any sort of high opinion of yourself. So not only is this about class consciousness, but Connell also doesn't want to be an imposition to Marianne, and Marianne doesn't want to be presumptuous. This isn't the only way that Irish cultural context shows up in Sally Rooney's novels. Her first 2 novels, Conversations with Friends and Normal People, take place in a post-crash Ireland. Or I guess all of her novels technically take place in post-crash Ireland because they all happened after 2008.
Financial crash in 2000. You mean like the Obama?
Oh, no, not that one.
Wait, what are you talking about?
No, different one. Hold on. Ireland had a financial crash in 2008. Kind of similar to the one that happened in America, actually. Their economy was growing and growing and growing, but it didn't have the structure to support its growth. So it got too big and then collapsed. The bank system was completely messed up. Borrowers who were using loans to finance their homes were suddenly in a position where the bank was foreclosing on their houses, and then they were left homeless, which caused a housing crisis. People were out of homes. There were people who were living in hotel rooms that were being subsidized by the government, trying to find a new place to stay, all the while driving past their home that's vacant. Nobody's using it. They technically could still be there, but the bank had to take it back. There were housing estates that were also left vacant. It was a big mess. Again, in Normal People, Connell and Marianne go to one of these empty housing estates called the Ghost Estate. In that same interview with the London Review Bookshop, Rooney reads this excerpt. It's towards the beginning of the book, so there really isn't any spoilers.
He kicked a crushed can of Dutch gold aimlessly and sent it skidding towards the French doors. This is probably 3 times the size of my house, he said. Would you say? She felt foolish for not realizing what he had been thinking about. Probably, she said. I haven't seen upstairs, obviously. 4 bedrooms. Jesus. Just lying empty, no one living in it, he said. Why don't they give them away if they can't sell them? I'm not being thick with you, I'm genuinely asking. She shrugged. She didn't actually understand why. Something to do with capitalism, she said. Yeah. Everything is, that's the problem, isn't it?
Rooney says that initially she put Connell and Marianne in that place because she wanted them to be alone in a place that wasn't just the 2 of their houses, but realized after she placed them there that she couldn't write that scene without exploring what does this geographical space represent in their lives. In conclusion, rejecting capitalist influences on your life is really hard, and Sally Rooney talks about that in her novels, especially in the political and cultural context that these characters find themselves in. I'll leave us with a clip of Roisin reading an incredible quote by Andrea Longchu that was just too good not to put in this video.
Over and over, Rooney characters put their faith in love as a means of escape from their conventional roles assigned to them by society and by each other. No sooner have they achieved this than they are rudely confronted by the inequalities of wealth, status, and power that are clearly fatal to their idealism, but not to love itself. I take this to be the modest provocation of Rooney's novels, the idea that love is real precisely because it is a product, one created by social conventions, by market forces, by systems of violence, and behind all of this, by human beings themselves. This is not, I admit, a Marxist theory of love. It is something more expected. A lover's theory of Marxism.
Now that we're solid on our background, let's read some Rooney. Yeah, I'm never going to say it again. I'm never going to say that ever again. Before any Sally Rooney novels were officially released, she was the #1 debater in the entire world, actually, which she talks about in an essay she wrote called Even If You Beat Me. It was published in the Dublin Review in 2015, and this got her a lot of attention. It's about her time learning about what competitive debate was, becoming a competitive debater herself, and then getting so good at it that she was in the position to be judging these debates. She got disillusioned by it once she was actually inside of the system. It's about popularity, it's about wanting to fit in, it's kind of about sexism, it's about a lot of things. She packs a lot in that essay. Then comes Mr. Salary. Mr. Salary is a short story that Sally Rooney published in 2017. Mr. Salary is about Suki, a 24-year-old girl who years ago moved in with an older family friend, Nathan, because, quote, her mother was dead and her father was difficult. In this story, Rooney lays out what will be her calling cards in her future works. A subtle but undeniable handle on tension and power in a seemingly quiet story about the overwhelming feeling of love, dancing around desire, and ruminating on death and what it means to be a person alive in the world. In 2021, that essay was paired with another essay called Color and Light and released as 2 stories. Color and Light is similar but so different. It's about a young Irish boy who works at a hotel, and suddenly this mysterious woman comes in and begins talking to him, and his seemingly gray life is interrupted with the color of her personality. A few months after Mr. Salary was originally published, Sally Rooney released her first novel, Conversations with Friends. It won her many awards and launched her career as a novelist. It's about our narrator, Frances, who's a university student, and her best friend, Bobby, who she used to date. Bobby and Frances now do spoken word poetry together, and they catch the eye of this photojournalist who's kind of famous, Melissa. She wants to do a piece about them, so she invites them over. They meet her husband, Nick, and slowly but surely, Nick and Frances develop a connection. And so do Bobby and Melissa. The book is about how these 4 people's lives intertwined and are changed by each other. In the beginning of the novel, Frances is very reluctant to engage in the more emotional aspects of life and love. In an interview for this novel with the Louisiana Channel, Sally Rooney talks a little bit more about this. Frances believes that it's not possible for her to give herself over to another person because her ideology and belief system don't leave room to accommodate for that. Capitalist structures expect women to give more of themselves than men, and as a feminist and an analytical person, Frances thinks, no, what's the point of that then? Frances also at the beginning of the novel definitely wants to be seen and wants to be seen as interesting. She's often thinking about herself in relation to Bobby, who is this outward, interesting person who says what she thinks. Nick gives her the feeling of being seen and appreciated. Conversations with Friends is also about Frances rejecting the archetypes that she places everybody in. One thing that I personally appreciate about Sally Rooney's novels is that she doesn't lean on archetypes for her characters. In Conversations with Friends specifically, you might think that Melissa, because she's married to Nick, is the evil wife, and Frances might think of herself as the scandalous other woman. But actually, Sally Rooney says that those archetypes that we project onto the people around us inhibit us from understanding what we're actually feeling, and inhibit us from exploring unconventional ways to live our lives in connection with the people in them. And of course, this novel is also marked by all of the conversations that they're having about the state of the world, politics, culture, gender, etc., etc. This book is a favorite of one of my favorite YouTubers, and honestly, probably one of yours if you're watching this, Uncarly, and I was really struck by what she said in a video talking about it. If you perceive people to have more power than you don't believe you can hurt them. I'll leave you with this quote from the novel. Things and people move around me, taking positions in obscure hierarchies, participating in systems I didn't know about and never would. A complex network of objects and concepts. You live through certain things before you understand them. You can't always take the analytical position. The predecessor to Rooney's second published novel is a short story called At the Clinic. Published in the White Review in 2016, At the Clinic meets Connell and Marianne, who would be the main characters of Normal People, at a dentist's office. Marianne needs to get her wisdom tooth taken out, and Connell drives her to the appointment. At the Clinic kind of serves as a snapshot of all of the dynamics that we get in Normal People. It's a whiplash between both of their perspectives, how they're thinking and feeling about one another, and it's so frustrating to the reader who sees it from the outside, but it's also so incredibly, undeniably human. Which brings me to Normal People, Sally Rooney's second published novel, and undeniably the biggest one of her career. She said that she was interested in the flashbacks that she wrote in At the Clinic. She included a lot of Marianne and Connell's history in snapshots, and she wanted to explore that and expand it, and it became a book. These things happen. I'm going to read a list of some of the awards that this book has won. Longlisted for the Booker Prize, won Irish Novel of the Year at the Irish Book Awards, Waterstone's Book of the Year 2018, Costa Book Award in the novel category, longlisted for the Dylan Thomas Prize and Women's Prize for Fiction in 2019, ranked 25th in The Guardian's Best 100 Books of the 21st Century, translated into 46 languages, and like I said before, praised by the likes of Barack Obama and Taylor Swift. Normal People is about 2 people Connell and Marianne. Connell is a highly intelligent, popular athlete, and Marianne is a highly intelligent, unpopular loner. We meet them in high school, and they begin to have an intensely emotional and erotic relationship that weaves in and out of their lives from that time into university. It's the most revealing, challenging, and pivotal relationship they'll ever have in their lives. And, yeah, that's it. No plot, just vibes. But the vibes are immaculate. Sally Rooney wanted to ask the question, when we say we love someone, what does that actually mean? Rooney finds it important to specify that she's not trying to establish herself as the authority on specific views about class or gender in her novels. She said if she wanted to do that, she would just write an essay about it. The characters are not representative of class and gender, but they are a product of class and gender. The book is also trying to explore how we're developing language for ambiguity, but there's still a gap. Connell is having a conversation with his mom, and she says, when I was your age, people were either together or they weren't. And Connell says, well, where did I come from then? Because his father is absent. Ambiguity has always existed, it's just that now we're trying to put language to it. I think normal people is trying to put language to it, or perhaps acknowledge that there is not necessarily language for it, but that's okay anyway. All of it is normal. Marianne feels alienated from normality as an individual. She sometimes thinks she's better than it, and sometimes thinks she's worse. Connell really desperately wants normality, and he gets really anxious when he feels like he's falling short of it. But they are both normal. Their unconventional relationship is normal. All of it is normal. Here is a quote from Normal People. No one can be independent of other people completely, so why not give up the attempt, she thought. Go running in the other direction. Depend on people for everything. Allow them to depend on you. Why not? Sally Rooney's third novel, Beautiful World, Where Are You?, was published in 2021, and it marked a level of maturity that her previous books hadn't reached yet. I'm going to read this next part from my notes because I think it's important to get right. But Sally Rooney actually declined an offer from an Israeli publisher to translate Beautiful World, Where Are You? Into Hebrew, citing the Palestinian-led boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. In October of 2021, she said, "The Hebrew language translation rights to my new novel are still available, and if I can find a way to sell these rights that's compliant with the BDS movement's institutional boycott guidelines, I would be very pleased and proud to do so." In retaliation, 2 Israeli bookshops actually pulled all of her publications from their shelves. Later, there was a letter released by the Artists for Palestine in the UK, where 70 writers and publishers stood with Sally Rooney and declared their support for her decision. Last October, in 2024, Sally Rooney and over 5,500 other writers signed an open letter pledging not to work with Israeli cultural institutions. The book is about best friends Eileen and Alice. Alice is a successful, kind of famous novelist who's recovering from an emotional breakdown in the west of Ireland, where she meets Felix, a warehouse worker, and although they don't really hit it off immediately, after they spend some time together, they begin building a connection. Eileen works at a literary magazine in Dublin, and she is going through a bad breakup with somebody who she honestly thought she was going to marry, but she develops a connection with Simon, a childhood best friend. The novel is formatted so that we're alternating between a character's perspective and an email that they send to another character. So let's say we have Alice's perspective in one chapter. The next chapter would be an email that Alice sends to Eileen, and then the third chapter would be Eileen's perspective. The name of the novel is derived from a Friedrich Schiller poem called The Gods of Greece. The original line is, "Beauteous world, where art thou gone?" He's lamenting the loss of a world full of nature and the divine, but he's ultimately holding out hope for us to find those spaces where that world still exists. It mirrors the themes of the novel perfectly. The emails between Eileen and Alice are discussing what's happening in their personal lives, so we'll get a chapter about them and then we'll get an email about how they actually feel, but it's also about them discussing what's going on in politics, what's going on with religion, how they feel about the world being in the state that it's in, and how they're trying to exist anyway and live despite. What does it mean to be alive at a time where everything falls apart? Love in the time of the apocalypse. This book doesn't give anybody any concrete answers, which I think is the point. It discusses the usefulness of art and novels in trying times, how it's not really changing anything, But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have value. Bringing it back to Marxism, there is a great conversation that happens in this book with people who are trying to define what the working class even is anymore. And of course, this book is still filled with the tension and romance and power dynamics about gender and class that all of Sally Rooney's books have. Here are 2 quotes that I love from the book. What if the meaning of life on Earth is not eternal progress towards some unspecified goal? The engineering and production of more and more powerful technologies, the development of more and more complex and abstruse cultural forms. What if these things just rise and recede naturally, like tides, while the meaning of life remains the same always? Just to live and be with other people. I was tired, it was late, I was sitting half asleep in the back of a taxi, remembering strangely that wherever I go, you are with me, and so is he, and that as long as you both live, the world will be beautiful to me. You guys, it stopped filming right after I checked to see if it was filming, so I actually filmed the rest of this video, and now I have to do it all over again. Okay, we're on to Intermezzo. I don't even remember what the connecting thing I said was. I'm sure you've been seeing all over the internet and still are. It released last September in 2024. The novel follows 2 brothers who are grieving their father's death. Ivan, the younger of the 2, is in his early 20s. He's a former chess prodigy, and he becomes romantically involved with Margaret, who's in her mid-30s. She is the program director of an art center. Peter, Ivan's older brother, is a 32-year-old human rights lawyer who is romantically involved with Naomi, who's in her early 20s. She's a student, and she's a former sex worker. And he's also kind of involved with Sylvie. Sylvie was Peter's college sweetheart, but they broke up because she suffered a major accident. Even so, they have a very close, intense, best friendship and relationship. Honestly, they kind of remind me of Connell and Marianne in the sense that it feels like there's a gravitational pull between the 2 of them to stay in each other's lives. It's Sally Rooney's most mature book yet. In that same article with the New Statesman that I mentioned before, which I highly recommend you read, it's so fascinating. It's a really great interview. Sally Rooney says that unlike chess, which is a game that you are either focused in playing or you're not, grief isn't as easy to pin down. It's more abstract. And through the course of the book, Ivan and Peter are trying to ascertain where grief is actually living inside of themselves and how it's affecting the people around them. This causes them to have explosive anger toward one another, but also this deep, desperate need to feel closer to one another. The brothers and also some of the other characters in this book are struggling with wanting to keep their intimate life personal and private, but also still wanting to live in community and reach out to others, connect with them, and love them. They're also struggling with the archetypes that they're afraid other people will project onto them if they knew what their situation was. Similarly to that, they're also struggling with the fact that their situations don't necessarily fit into conventions. It bothers certain characters more than others, but they are really wrestling with not understanding how to live their life in tune with how they feel. Partly because they don't always know how they feel, but also because there's not necessarily a model that represents what they're going through, which can add to the alienation and confusion, especially on top of having to deal with all of that grief. Here are some quotes from Intermezzo. Yes, I would like, he thinks, to live in such a way that I could vanish into thin air at any time without affecting anyone, and in fact I feel that for me this would constitute the perfect and perhaps the only acceptable life. At the same time, I want desperately to be loved. Well, if that's suffering, he thinks, let me suffer. Yes, to love whoever I have left, and if ever I lose someone, let me descend into a futile and prolonged rage. Yes, despair, wanting to break things, furniture, appliances, wanting to get into fights, to scream, to walk in front of a bus. Yes, let me suffer, please, to love just these few people. To know myself capable of that, I would suffer every day of my life. And my personal favorite. Nonetheless, it is better to feel hopeful and optimistic about one's life on Earth while engaged in the never-ending struggle to pay rent than to feel despondent and depressed while engaged in the same non-optional struggle anyway. Before we continue on to what I'm sure was the long-awaited limited series section of this video, I have a question for you. What authors do you want to see a beginner's guide to? I've had the best time researching this video and making this video, and I'm excited to continue doing more like this. So please leave a comment below, or you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at ChrisSophia13. Shoot me a DM. Let me know who you like to see next. And now, drumroll please. Normal People, the limited series. The moment we've all been waiting for. Normal People was adapted into a 12-episode limited series for Hulu and the BBC. It was released April 26, 2020, which is almost exactly 5 years ago. That's crazy. It was received very well from critics and audiences alike, having a 91 and a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, respectively. Sally Rooney also took part in writing the series along with Alice Birch and Margot Rao, or perhaps Rowe. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. It was directed by Lenny Abrahamson and Hetty McDonald, and it launched Daisy Edgar Jones and Paul Mescal's career into essentially outer space. Part of the reason why this series hit so close to home for people was because it was released during quarantine. It was a series about intimacy and deep yearning and being close to the person that you love, and also feeling like you couldn't possibly be further away from that person, all while people weren't able to do that in real life. That, on top of the fact that this was a highly anticipated adaptation for a beloved novel, was the perfect storm. Sally Rooney has been open about the fact that the attention from the series wasn't something that always sit well with her. She found the attention on the young actors to be overwhelming and felt partially responsible for contributing to the media frenzy that they were subject to. That's not fully the reason why she took a bit of a step back from the next limited series that was an adaptation of her books, Conversations with Friends. Conversations with Friends was also made into a 12-episode limited series that premiered on Hulu and the BBC, this time in 2022. It starred Alison Oliver as the main character, Jemima Kane, who was in Sex Education, Joe Alwyn, and Sasha Lane, who wound up starring in Twisters alongside Daisy Edgar Jones. This series didn't receive as much critical acclaim. Audiences seem to attribute it to the fact that Sally Rooney wasn't as involved with this one, even though there are still a lot of people who worked on Normal People that also worked on Conversations with Friends. When Rooney was asked about this for the New York Times, she said it was because she was working on Beautiful World, Where Are You? And realized that she's a novelist, and that's where she wants to focus her attention. She's not a screenwriter, and she trusted the people who were working on Conversations with Friends. We've gone through everything that I found the most relevant to know about all of Sally Rooney's work. That's not true. Editing Christina here. There's one thing that I think is perfect to conclude this video on. It's a quote from Beautiful World, Where Are You? And I've put it at the end of the outro. I was going to read it, but then I found a TikTok of internet's resident librarian Jack Edwards reading the quote, and I knew that I had to include him instead. So stay tuned. He will be at the end of this video, and it's the perfect summation of everything that we talked about. Like I said at the top of this video, if you really didn't know much about Sally Rooney, I hope this gave you more of an insight, and if you did, I hope you learned something new. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said before, if there's another author that you think I should make a video like this about, leave it in the comments below, and please consider subscribing. A Celebrity Book Club-esque video is coming out very soon. I've hinted at it in this video. And follow me on TikTok and Instagram at ChrisSophia13. I've loved coming back to BookTube. I can't wait to make more videos, and following me and subscribing and leaving a comment really helps. I'm excited to see this community grow and make more videos for y'all.
Alice, do you think the problem of the contemporary novel is simply the problem of contemporary life? I agree. It seems vulgar, decadent, even epistemically violent to invest energy in the trivialities of sex and friendship when human civilization is facing collapse. But at the same time, this is what I do every day. We can wait, if you like, to ascend to some higher plane of being, at which point we'll start directing all our mental and material resources toward existential questions and thinking nothing of our own families, friends, lovers, and so on. But we'll be waiting, in my opinion, a long time, and in fact, we'll die first. After all, when people are lying on their deathbeds, don't they always start talking about their spouses and children? And isn't death just the apocalypse in the first person? So, in that sense, there is nothing bigger than what you so derisively call breaking up and staying together. Because at the end of our lives, when there's nothing left in front of us, it's still the only thing we want to talk about. Maybe we're just born to love and worry about the people we know, and to go on loving and worrying even when there are more important things we should be doing. And if that means the human species is going to die out, isn't it, in a way, a nice reason to die out? The nicest reason you can imagine? Because when we should have been reorganizing the distribution of the world's resources and transitioning collectively to a sustainable economic model, we were worrying about sex and friendship instead, because we loved each other too much and found each other too interesting. And I love that about humanity. And in fact, it's the very reason I root for us to survive, because we are so stupid about each other.
Oh, there's a dog barking. Marxism is something to get excited about, I suppose. Connell and Marianne. Oh, dogs. I know you're so excited about normal people. Dogs. You probably can't even hear it, but that's fine. They're talking to each other. Ruff.